The movie begins with a close-up of a wedding invite, followed by shots of circled ads in the yellow pages for male escorts. A woman brushes her teeth while listening to her voicemail. In the message, a man reassures her that he has received all of her messages, and she should stop worrying, as they will easily fool her family and friends into believing they are in love, and also make her ex jealous. Catherine continues to worry about it, as she feels very awkward with the whole situation. When the courier arrives at her door to collect the plane ticket she needs to send to Nick, she is unable to let go of the envelope, scared that she is making a big mistake. She is so nervous that she blubbers to the courier about everything before finally handing him the envelope. After he leaves, Kat panics as she prepares for the trip. She stumbles around her apartment and bangs her toe into the door. She is in absolute chaos. She finally steps out with numerous bags and arrives at the airport. As she maneuvers her cart through the check-in line, her colleague follows her, and we realize that she works for Virgin Atlantic as a customer service executive. Her colleague begs her to help him out of a difficult situation, and despite being in a hurry, she stops by his workstation and helps him out before finally boarding the flight. She is so anxious to meet Nick that she hides behind the safety manual. She peers over it, looking at the passengers coming on board. A fellow passenger takes it as a sign of her nervousness and asks her about it. Kat, in her scattered mind, blurts out that she is going to her little sister's wedding, where her ex-fiancé is the best man. The woman nods her head in understanding. Unable to sit still, she interrupts a steward and starts drinking alcohol right off the tray in his hand. She apologetically informs him that her date is going to soon arrive, and she needs him to be very handsome. Even as she is blabbering to the steward, he spots the man who takes the seat beside her, and gives a very flattering reaction to whomever is there. Kat turns apprehensively and spots Nick. She is taken aback by how good-looking he is. She smiles hesitantly at him. Nick smoothly leans forward and brushes a kiss on her cheek. When they go back to their seats, he is still holding her hand, and Kat finds herself reluctant to let go. In her nervousness, she randomly starts talking to him and commenting about his work, which makes them very awkward. She slips behind in her seat to hide her embarrassment, just to jump up again to inform him that unlike other families, hers is not very close. When they arrive in London, Kat dresses up in a blue dress, but realizes Nick's tie is the same color. Worrying about giving a desperate impression to her family, she changes her outfit. When they reach the mansion where the party is being held, they are met by her Aunt Bee first, right at the door, who pities Kat for being the elder unmarried daughter. She also comments on how her ex-fiancé is the best man, which makes it all even more sad for Kat. To escape her pity, Kat pulls Nick forward and introduces him as her new boyfriend. The aunt is immediately impressed with him and starts asking questions about him, which is when they realize they never discussed Nick's backstory. So, Kat pulls Nick inside the coat closet, and they create a backstory for him, how Nick is a therapist, they met recently, and he fell insanely in love with her. She also hands him his fees and insists that he count the cash before accepting, much to Nick's amusement. While counting the money, Nick casually comments that the fees do not include charges for any sort of intimacy that they share, apart from the pretend dating. Kat, in her nervousness, blurts out the truth about how she finds paying money to sleep with someone repulsive. Realizing her goof-up, she apologizes, but Nick just takes it in his stride and cautions her that if she wishes to continue successfully with their charade, she will need to stop apologizing for it and start thinking of their situation as a simple business transaction. Kat agrees with him, but is unable to stop apologizing. As they step out, they meet her mom, who hugs her enthusiastically, teasing her about making out with Nick in the closet. Embarrassed, Kat introduces her to Nick. Her mom is very happy to meet him. Continuing on her excited chatter, she just pulls them with her to the next room, explaining the plans for the next few days, which include the welcome cocktail party, followed by young people in the park, followed by stags and hens, followed by a picnic and rehearsal dinner, and then finally the wedding. She drops them off by Kat's father. Kat meets him much more warmly and hugs him tightly. She introduces him to Nick, who meets him with equal respect. Just then, her sister Amy spots them from across the room, screams, and rushes to her. Amy hugs her enthusiastically like her mother, but with none of the warmth of her father. Just as quickly as she rushed toward Kat, she rushes back to another guest. When Nick steps away to refill her father's drink, Kat and her father get a moment to chat. He asks her how she met Nick, to which Kat cheekily tells the truth as the yellow pages, though her father assumes it to be a joke and laughs it off. Just then, her mother raises a toast and begins giving a speech. In her inebriated state, she starts talking about Kat's past, and how she hoped that Kat would be the first to get married, as she always had a lot of admirers in school, and the one time she was about to get married, she got dumped. Kat gets almost teary-eyed listening to her mother, but she puts on a brave smile. As her mother tries to continue, Kat's ex-fiancé Jeffrey interrupts her speech by playing a distracting out-of-tune note on the piano, which makes her pause and take notes. She ends her speech by congratulating Amy and Edward. Later, when Kat steps out of the restroom, Jeffrey is waiting outside for her. He calls her Katmandu, his secret nickname for her, and gives her a cheek kiss as a greeting. Kat is taken aback, and is about to lose her hard-won composure when they are interrupted by her cousin, who insults Jeffrey and steals Kat away. When they return to the main room, her cousin asks Kat about Nick. Kat shares the made-up story about him being a therapist, and just then, Nick turns and their eyes meet. He winks at her and goes back to speaking to the old ladies by whom he is surrounded. The cousin commends Kat on her taste in men. A little later, Kat and Nick are at the bar getting a drink. Just when Kat is about to take a sip, Amy calls her and asks her for the drink. Kat, being accustomed to Amy's antics, hands over her glass, and she pushes it closer to Amy, who waits with a straw in her mouth, trying to be cute about it. Nick watches the exchange, quietly slips his drink to Kat, and asks the server to get him another. Kat and Amy talk about how all this wedding preparation is making Amy feel so glad, as finally everyone is focused on her and her happiness. Edward joins them, and he and Amy start discussing the dance lessons. Edward is against taking any, but Amy wants him to, so Nick encourages him to go for it, and also suggests that he and Kat will join them if they wish. Amy gets super happy hearing that. Nick walks out to the balcony and finds Jeffrey standing out there alone. Nick expresses his cynical view about weddings, being a place for people to get drunk and say embarrassing things. When Jeffrey laughs at it, calling him a philosopher, Nick informs him he is a shrink. Jeffrey turns around and spots Kat laughing with Amy. He blurts out that there is a girl he likes, but she is with another guy. Suddenly Kat comes up and kisses Nick out of the blue. She spots Jeffrey and introduces him to Nick as her ex-fiancé. Awkward, Jeffrey leaves. Kat pulls Nick into a corner, and they discuss his conversation with Jeffrey. Nick informs her that he feels Jeffrey still loves her. Kat gets very curious about why Nick thinks so, and starts asking him questions about it. Later they go to Kat's parents' home to stay for the duration of the wedding. When they arrive, Kat starts explaining to Nick how her mother is traditional and would want them to stay in separate bedrooms, pretending to be upset, but in truth relieved, as she does not wish to share a bedroom with Nick. But her mother happily allows them to share the room, totally shocking Kat. Things get more awkward in the bedroom, though not for Nick, as he is accustomed to such intimacy. He, without any inhibitions, removes all his clothes right where he stands. Who does that? And just walks naked into the shower. All the while, Kat tries to avoid looking directly at him. While he showers, with the door open of course, she follows him, yes, right into the bathroom, reading aloud a few lines from Nick's magazine interview, where he speaks about women having the exact love life they want. She asks him how he started in this unusual profession. Nick tells her a story about how his mother invaded his privacy, and it scarred him for life, so he wanted to learn about intimacy in a different way. Kat is shocked and sympathetic about it, but Nick laughs and shares that he is just pulling her leg. When they finally go to bed, Nick, of course, is in the nude, while Kat creates a sort of border with blankets between them before lying down beside him. They discuss Jeffrey, and Nick shares that he sounded tormented when they spoke at the party. Kat asks him for more details as to his state of mind, but Nick's already asleep. The next day, it's young people in the park, the day of the whole wedding event. They play baseball, and Kat tries different ways to make Jeffrey jealous, like spilling water over her see-through shirt, tying her shirt tails and exposing her midriff, and she even asks Nick to lose the game. While pretending to be close, but just trying to make Jeffrey realize his loss, Nick and Kat start coming closer to each other. The next day, on their way to the Stags and Hens party, they discuss the other occasions Nick has been to as an escort, and he shares with her that he never did a wedding before. On the drive she asks him more questions, and he explains that real intimacy is not about sleeping together, but understanding and being giving toward the partner. On her insistence, he demonstrates for her, and she falls under his spell, much to her chagrin. At the stag party, Jeffrey and Edward discuss an incident from their youth. Jeffrey spots Nick and shares his misgivings about him with Edward. At the Hens party, Amy gets drunk and hugs Kat fiercely, while mentioning how while growing up, Kat was always the more attractive sister, and was always surrounded by guys. Kat realizes she is speaking out of jealousy, and stops her before she embarrasses herself more. Amy suddenly gets emotional and starts crying, and worrying how she should never be allowed to get married. Kat asks her about it, but she just jumps off to the dance floor. Nick takes a very drunk Edward home after the party. Kat and the girls' party ride across the city in a limo. When she gets back to the house, she seduces Nick in her stepfather's boat. The next morning, when Nick kisses her good morning, she is in shock about what happened the previous night. Back in the bedroom, when Nick brings her some breakfast, she pretends not to remember anything and asks him about it. Nick brushes it off, believing that she actually did not remember, but then he finds cash in her purse. He realizes she intended to pay him for sleeping with her. Upset and angry, he interrupts her shower, just walks into the bath, and pulls away the curtain. Apparently that's an okay thing to do in this movie. They get into an argument and Nick walks away, telling her that if he did it for money, she was short a few £100s. Later, as he has breakfast with her dad, Kat's dad comments on how he's glad someone made use of the boat, which is when Nick realizes he knows about them. When Kat comes in, they continue to argue in whispers. Later, they join Amy and Edward at the dance studio. As they begin to dance, they deliberately step over each other's toes, trying to hurt each other. The dance becomes more playful as they start enjoying it, and it eventually becomes more heartfelt. They smile and look into each other's eyes as they go around in circles. The next day, they wait for the car to pick them up to go to the wedding location, sit outside on the porch and talk. Nick gives her the reason for him deciding to do a wedding for the first time, because when he heard Kat on the phone, he heard an undertone of hope, which compelled him to take up her offer. When they arrive at the beautiful chalet where the wedding is supposed to take place, they are shown to a very cute room with a poster bed. Excited, Kat jumps and lies down on the bed. Nick joins her, smiling. They both stare at the ceiling when Kat mentions that while she has shared everything about herself with Nick, she knows very little about him. Nick starts telling her about himself, his allergies, and how he studied literature at a very prestigious university. And in the end, when he reveals that he feels he would have missed never having met her, Kat becomes emotional hearing him. Later that evening, Kat, Nick, her father, and her cousin play poker. Edward comes up to them, looking for Amy. Kat's father remarks to Nick on his ability to impress women. Before Nick can recover from the surprise, Kat's father politely sends him off to fetch Amy. When Nick walks into the little cabin by the water, looking for her, he finds Amy and Jeffrey in the middle of a very intense discussion. When they see him, they jump apart, and Jeffrey leaves, pretending the conversation was about catering. Nick apologizes to Amy for interrupting, and informs her that her father sent him to look out for her. Amy tells him a story about how, as a child, she would come up to this place. Her eyes are wet, and Nick realizes that Jeffrey broke off the engagement with Kat because of Amy. Jeffrey seeks out Kat, who is with her mom. He asks to speak to her, but her mom takes a dig at him for wasting 7 years of Kat's life. As they step aside to talk, Jeffrey tries to confess to Kat, but he mumbles around, unable to say anything clearly. Just as he is about to say something, Kat spots Nick walking her way. He looks a bit upset, so she runs over to him. Nick takes her hand, and they walk away together. Before the rehearsal dinner that evening, Nick and Kat's father have a chat, and her father talks about how when he started dating Kat's mom, he met Kat, and from that day he became her dad. He shares his worries, even though Kat is a grown-up. Nick takes the opportunity, and without explaining anything, he asks his permission to date Kat. Kat's father leans toward him and eyes him closely. He then subtly says that he believed they were already dating, but the look on his face clearly shows that he knew more than he was letting on, and that he is giving his permission despite that. At the rehearsal dinner, Kat's mom shares a sweet childhood story about how the sisters were inseparable until a boy, Kat's first little boyfriend, started liking Amy, and they fought over it. They all laugh at the memory, and Kat gets up to get more wine. Jeffrey follows her, seeing that Nick also pretends to take back the empty bottles, and goes looking for them. In the cellar, Jeffrey reveals to Kat that he slept with Amy before their wedding, and not once, but multiple times. He says that they did it until they got it out of their system, which was months after he broke up with her. He suddenly realized he was in love with Amy when Edward proposed to her. He's like the poster boy for class a jerk. Kat is rocked off her feet by this. Shaken, she steps out of the cellar in a daze. Her cousin finds her there, still reeling from the blow, and spots Jeremy. The cousin scolds him for revealing it, which hurts Kat more, as she realizes that her cousin hid the truth from her. As Kat walks away, she spots Amy and looks at her in disgust. Amy realizes she knows and rushes to her, begging her to not say anything. Nick walks in just then, and she goes into his arms to hide from the hurt. But Amy looks at him accusingly, yelling at him for telling her, which makes Kat feel more betrayed, that he kept this secret from her. She steps out of his embrace and walks away alone. Nick runs after her as she walks in the rain. She turns her anger toward him, calling him a liar, as he let her make a fool of herself trying to win back Jeffrey. She blames herself for falling for his lies and pretending to be happy for the sake of others. Nick is surprised. He asks her to continue blaming him, and using what happened with him as an excuse to botch up more relationships, like she was using Jeffrey's betrayal to end theirs. He walks away, leaving her alone. Back at home, he packs his stuff and leaves. Edward, who is unaware of the whole thing, rushes after him and offers him keys to the boathouse, with a remark on how perfect he thought Nick is for Kat, and assures him that whatever the troubles, he believes Kat and Nick will work them out. In her room, Kat is crying when Amy walks in and thanks her for not telling Ed her secret, promising her she will inform him herself, just not before the wedding. Kat sarcastically agrees with her and scathingly remarks that she needs to find the right time to tell Ed about how she was in a physical relationship with his best friend for months, and that she should do it after the wedding, so Ed had no way of backing out even though his world is collapsing around him. For that night, she is not going to forgive Amy. Amy, crying, nods and leaves her alone. Nick tries to get a flight out for the next day, but is not able to. The next day, Kat and her mother are getting ready, and her mother guesses something is wrong. But Kat reassures her that everything is okay. At the wedding venue, Kat is off in the back, sitting alone when her father joins her. He questions her about why she's letting Nick go, quoting the same line from Nick's interview, revealing that he is aware of everything and yet approves of Nick. He asks Kat to go after what she wants and not worry about anyone else. Kat kisses his cheek in gratitude and rushes off to catch Nick before he leaves. But when she arrives at the cottage, she finds the envelope full of money that she paid him lying on the bed, and Nick gone. At the church, Amy finally musters up the courage to tell Ed the truth. Ed is shocked and angry. He runs out and yells at Jeffrey, who sees him coming toward him and takes off at a run, with Ed chasing him. They run out on the road, fighting. Nick spots them as he drives by on his way to the airport. Jeffrey runs away while Ed is still chasing him. Nick rides the car alongside him and asks him to get in, as Jeffrey is long gone and is never coming back. They park the car at the side of the road and talk. Ed shares how he felt pity for Nick when he saw him leaving the night before, and now he feels like a fool. As he speaks about his relationship with Amy, he realizes that he was the one who put her on a pedestal when she's just as flawed as the rest of them, and that he still loves her. Nick explains to him that if he gives up even without trying, he will always regret it. Even as he is saying this to Ed, he realizes that he too will regret letting Kat go. Kat comforts Amy as they wait for Ed. Their rift is somewhat healed because Amy decided to reveal the truth to Ed before the wedding. When Kat steps out of the chapel, she is almost run over by Ed, who is on his way to meet Amy. She finds Nick right behind him. She gets teary-eyed seeing him. Nick holds her close and reveals to her his feelings. How even fighting with her meant more to him than being with another woman. Kat doesn't say anything, but looks at him with her heart in her eyes. As they are kissing, Nick steps back and pulls her back into the church, as he is the best man for Ed, now that Jeffrey is gone. Throughout the whole ceremony, Kat and Nick exchange loving smiles and winks. As Kat raises a toast at dinner, Amy mouths, "I love you," to her. Later, at the reception, Nick and Kat hug each other close as they dance. In the epilogue, we are told that Ed and Amy realize that making up was worth fighting for. Nick quits the business and takes Kat out on a real date, while Jeffrey continues to be his hopeless self.